So good morning, I'm Jackie Sharon. I'm Chief Banking Officer with Greenfield Cooperative Bank, and I'd like to welcome you to this housing breakfast. I'd also like to thank Greenfield Community College for the wonderful breakfast and for hosting us again. I believe we all can agree that they put on a spectacular spread, and mine is waiting for me because I didn't want to eat right before I had to speak, so the bacon on top, of course. Greenfield Cooperative Bank is proud to sponsor today's Franklin County Chamber Breakfast, especially since it focuses on the topic that's close to all of us, housing. Monday, when I was driving home from work, and I was thinking about what I was going to say in the greeting, I was actually doing much better than usual, 2 days ahead of time. Usually it's the morning when I'm driving here. But I had Spotify on, and two songs came on that really resonated with this morning. So first was John Denver's Take Me Home, Country Road. I don't know how it popped on. I'm not going to admit that it's on my favorites, but it's there. But it reminds me of family, and you're going to say, why that? My younger brother, that's his go-to karaoke song. So no matter where we go with him, that's what he sings, regardless if he's on tune or not, he sings that. So that always makes me think of family. And the second one that came on was Memory Lane by Old Dominion. And that always makes me think of how wonderful it is to grow up and live in the Pioneer Valley. It really makes me think that we are so blessed to have such a wonderful community. Hearing those songs made me realize something fundamental. When we talk about housing, we aren't just talking about blueprints. We're not talking about, real estate. We're not talking about, the mechanicals of it. We're really talking about family. And we're talking about safety and that sense of belonging and community. We're talking about the dream of having a place to call home. And that is something that's becoming harder and harder for people to realize. The UMass Dunue Institute recently released a Western Mass housing study. And it talked about really what was going on in housing. The study, which is called Building Homes and Building Futures, really has struck home with me because it has provided us with data and evidence of how much we are in a housing crisis and how much we're looking at it not only in the entire region, but in Franklin County, that we have a housing shortage and that the housing costs have gone up dramatically. I know there's no magic wand or karaoke microphone that we can use to sing away this problem, but I am grateful for today's panel. I'm grateful that we'll be able to bring together the brain power and the expertise to start talking about what we can do, what the opportunities are, and how we can work together as a community to make that American dream happen. So thank you, and thank you to the panel for being here today.
Thank you, Jackie. And thanks again to Greenfield Cooperative Bank, not just for making today's breakfast possible, but for making home ownership possible. In keeping with today's theme, I think it's worth pointing out that local lenders like Greenfield Cooperative Bank don't just finance small businesses and mortgages, they help build futures. They are part of the solution, and apparently they have a pretty banging soundtrack to go with it. So can we give one more round of applause to Greenfield Cooperative Bank and also to GCC Dining Team for making today possible? And also thank you all for joining us at today's How's About Franklin County Chamber Breakfast. How's About Franklin County? Did you get it? Did everybody get it? Doesn't take a lot to amuse us. We like to have a little fun with the title of these events, and today that's probably where the fun's gonna end, because unlike last month's Super Breakfast, we don't have a fog machine, we don't have any surprise superheroes running around. What we do have, though, is we expect Secretary Augustus will be joining us, and we have a super stacked panel of housing experts who are here to help us unpack the harsh realities of Franklin County's housing crisis, and more importantly, as Jackie said, share insights on what we can do about it. Before we jump into it, we're gonna welcome some new members and some folks who are attending their first Franklin County Chamber Breakfast. So please wave or stand when I call your name. Welcome to our new members, Jennifer and Jay Heelman at Shelburne Falls Firehouse Studios. More new members. Welcome to Vincent Russo and Kevin Cormier at Exit New Options Real Estate. We've got a whole crew of folks who are attending their first chamber breakfast. Welcome to Beth Adele, Josh Bretner of Four Rivers Charter Public School. There they are. Lillian Audier, Jamie Moody, Ayumi Parsons are joining us from Greenfield Community College. Welcome. Welcome to Ann Borowski, Stephen DuPoint, Randy Parks, Liz Reno, and Lionel Remain of the Greenfield Housing Authority. Shondell Diaz is attending from Community Action's 3-county continuum of care. Welcome to our friend Alexandria Galloway from the town of Deerfield. Welcome to Liza Manchester from the Mary Lyon Foundation. Sarah Omet is joining us from D.A. Sullivan & Sons, and Bob Perry is here from Rachel's Table. Lewis Hale is here from JDR Builders, and it is not... Yeah, you can clap for Lewis. It's not his first breakfast, but I do also want to shout out that JD Ross, who is the president of JDR Builders, is also joining us. Welcome to both of them. Beverly Gilbo, Dale Thompson, Sarah Morgan, Pam Archer are joining us from Bay State Health. Nicole Gerton, Greg Roberts, Chris Pelletier, and Dan Montanga are here from the Sheriff's Office. Welcome. We are lucky to be joined by Greenfield Mayor Ginny DeSorger and Franklin County Sheriff Lori Streeter. And then a special hello to our friend who just arrived, Tony Morales, who is joining us. Hi, Tony. Your timing's perfect. Who's joining Dr. Carrie Spritzer and helping represent UMass today. The chancellor was expected to attend, but he had some last-minute travel plans, so he sends his regrets. All right, this one's an exciting one. You know and love him as the executive director of the United Arc, but today we are welcoming him as a new member and a published author. Congratulations to our very own Fred Warren. Fred's new book. Yeah, it's a big deal. Where does he find the time? I don't know. But Fred's new book, Deadline Dallas, is a historical fiction thriller that reimagines the JFK assassination with a suspenseful twist. It hits shelves November 18th, but you can pre-order a copy today using the QR code on the back of your programs. And that QR code redirects to a website called shopbooks.org or bookshops.org. It's one of the two, I always forget. But it is a third party that actually sells books from independent retailers. So you're supporting local when you do that. You can also buy it at Barnes & Noble, but use the QR code that we provided you. I ordered mine about a month ago, maybe more, and I can't wait to read it. So if you are interested in reading Fred's book and want to be part of the first ever Franklin County Chamber Book Club, you let us know. We'll put that together. I also want to acknowledge that our Franklin County Legislative Delegation could not be here today. They send their regrets. You know, typically we hold these breakfasts on a Friday. Due to some scheduling conflicts, we pushed this one to a Wednesday, which is when they're typically in the State House. But I do want to acknowledge that they are our most fierce advocates when it comes to pushing for rural incentives across the board, and that they work in partnership with so many of us here. So I want to take the time to acknowledge their hard work and celebrate their work as it kind of impacts policy, both on a state and regional level. In fact, I'm looking around and a lot of us are going to be on that 9 a.m. statewide legislative call, so all the more reason to keep it moving. If you are a chamber breakfast regular, you know that this is usually the part where I run through announcements, but today's program is packed, and I am committed to turning last month's on-time ending into a solid 2-breakfast streak. So in the interest of time, we are going to skip straight to the housing presentations. Do not get used to this. My bad jokes will be back in full force by November. Nobody get too excited. Yeah, thanks guys. But before I hand it over, I do want to take a few moments to kind of explain why this breakfast feels especially critical and frame today's program within the bigger picture of population loss and economic development. And also to toss out one big shiny disclaimer. I won't call this my Super Bowl because I think that kind of paints a depressing picture of my personal life, but I will say that hosting a housing breakfast has been on my chamber wish list since I started back in 2022. Housing comes up in almost every conversation I have, and looking around the room, I'm guessing that's probably true for you as well, whether or not we realize it. I think because in Franklin County and as residents of the Commonwealth's most rural community, when we talk about regional school consolidation, low student enrollment, vacant storefronts, and frequent foot traffic, workforce, salaries, taxes, and even which restaurants are still open on Sundays, we're actually talking about housing and its interdependence with population loss and economic vitality. Here is the context. This is the context part of the framing that I want you to take away. 10 out of 10 people die. It's just how it works. Franklin County is projected to lose 10% of our population over the next 20 years, and by 2050, total employment is expected to drop by nearly 20%. For a county with a tax base that's 75% residential, that is more than a red flag. That is a full-on flare. We're already seeing that impact in real time. Population loss puts significant strain on a small pool of resources, means fewer kids in our schools, fewer customers in our shops, fewer volunteers in our fire departments. And contrary to popular belief, the decline isn't caused by a mass exodus. That's something that I hear all the time, that people are leaving in these mass quantities. It's not true. People want to live here. People want to move here. We know. They call the chamber. We talk to them all the time. Many of you are in this room. The problem is that our population is disproportionately more senior than surrounding competing markets. Nearly half of our population right now is over the age of 50. And I'm speaking for myself here, but we're not getting any younger. In fact, the only thing older than our population is our housing stock, 60% of which was built before 1970. In Franklin County, our homes are old, they're unaffordable and expensive to maintain, they're energy inefficient. Claire is here, she can talk all about that. And they were designed for the larger families of yesteryear, not for today's smaller households, single professionals, or retirees. That's why our housing crisis simply won't fix itself as our older residents move on to what I like to call the ultimate housing development in the sky. The model has changed. Our limited housing stock doesn't fit the wants and needs of families and young professionals, and despite the intended design of our charming New England homes, younger generations do not want to live with their in-laws, except me, Katie Dean, if you're watching. Love you. Affordability is another hurdle. More than half of Franklin County residents are cost burdened, meaning that they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. Spending too much of that income just to keep a roof over their head. That means less money for savings, less money to spend at local businesses, less long-term sustainability, and greater strain on public resources. At the same time, Franklin County housing prices have jumped 33% since 2014, while our wages are still the lowest in the state. On average, about $53,000 annually here, compared to $91,512 statewide. That's a significant difference. Land may be cheaper, but the construction costs are the same as Boston, making it nearly impossible for developers to bring new units online without help, which is why our housing production rates lag so far behind. The shortage is real too. Franklin County has the lowest homeowner vacancy rate in Massachusetts, just 0.3%, and the lowest rental vacancy rate at 1.3%. For comparison, a healthy rental market is closer to 7%. That lack of supply diversity jacks up prices, limits mobility, and leaves our kids and our workforce with nowhere to go. I often hear that there's this common kind of argument to push for economic development first and then housing second. But the reality is that housing is economic development, and it's one of the most important strategies we can put forth. And thank you. And you all know that. Employers from across the region, Bay State Franklin, Greenfield Community College, and our manufacturers and our small retailers of all sizes all tell the same story. They cannot recruit or retain employees if those workers have nowhere to live. We cannot expand housing. We cannot expand existing industries or attract newer, higher paying employers without housing to support our workforce. And lastly, here's my big, shiny disclaimer. We're almost to the end. The housing crisis is complicated. That's why we're focusing today's conversation on countywide and statewide solutions. Today is not about debating individual parcels of land or specific projects, and my remarks should not be perceived as a blanket endorsement for building housing without strategy. Expanding access to housing is critical, but it has to be thoughtful, right-sized, and strategic. The goal isn't growth at all costs, it's sustainable growth that honors the history and character of Franklin County while making sure that our communities have a vibrant future. Aren't you glad I skipped announcements? I told you, I've been waiting for this for 3 years. Now you'll see on your programs that we were going to introduce Secretary Augustus next. I think we're going to shift that around and wait till he's here, and instead we're going to move to Megan Rhodes. Megan is the Housing and Livability Program Coordinator, Manager. I think her title might be more complicated than mine. At the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, Megan does this work day in, day out. We are really lucky to have her here to put this context a little more closely to home, so please help me welcome Megan.
All right, thank you, everybody. So I am a planner at the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, and we are the regional planning agency for the 26 towns in Franklin County. And my mission here today is to give you a very brief overview into the very complicated world of housing, and to give you a little insight into the state of housing here in Franklin County. So there has been a lot of focus on housing over the last year or so, at all levels of government. And in fact, just the last 2 years, there have been studies and reports released at the state level, the Western Mass level, county level, and then a number of our towns here in Franklin County have also examined the issue of housing in local plans. And in every single one of these reports, at every level of geography, the overwhelming conclusion has been, we simply do not have enough housing for our current residents or our future residents. And that is true for both market rate and affordable housing. So what does housing have to do with business and economic development? Jesse mentioned it a little bit, so I won't go into detail, but basically if you have abundant housing, it can help a community thrive. If you don't have enough housing or it's too expensive, then it just exacerbates other issues such as population decline and an aging workforce. So having housing is a really fundamental cornerstone of a community. So as Jesse mentioned, we have a declining population. It has been declining, and it is projected to continue to decline if current trends continue. So you might think, okay, we're losing population, and we don't have enough housing. Seems like the problem might kind of fix itself in the next couple of years. Unfortunately, that is not the case. We do have a declining population, but at the same time, we have an increasing number of households. How can this happen? It is a little complicated, but this graph here on the slide shows you, kind of illustrates how that's possible. 10 years ago, we had a family of 4 living in a single-family home. Fast forward to today, we now have that same family. It's now split into the empty nesters are still living in that one single-family home. But their adult child has left. They're now in an apartment in, say, Greenfield and have formed a new household. And their second adult child has also left the house, but they've left the state. And so what happens in this scenario is we had one household, one housing unit 10 years ago. We now have 2 households and 2 housing units, but we've also lost population. And this is the phenomenon that's been happening here in our region. And so we know we don't have enough housing for our current population. This scenario, this trend, means that the issue of housing is only going to get worse. Our demand is increasing. And so we're going to need even more housing to make sure that we have enough for everybody. And so not only is our population shrinking and aging, so is our workforce and our school-aged children. Across the board, school enrollments are declining. And for a sustainable population, we really need to not only support our aging population, but we also need to attract younger families and younger adults to this region in order to have a sustainable population and a robust workforce. And to do that, we're going to need to create housing. So why don't we have enough housing? Well, you can see in this graph, this is all the states across the country, all 50, and at the rate of which they've been issuing building permits. Massachusetts, I don't know if you can see, is in the orange all the way at the very low bottom of that scale. This graph is from the UMass Donahue Institute's report. And so we're not producing much housing. And if you put Western Mass on that graph, we're at the very bottom. Not to say that we want to be North Carolina or Florida and have really crazy housing development, but we're not even keeping up with demand. And so that's an issue. And so when we don't have enough housing, we have very low vacancy rates. As Jesse mentioned, a healthy housing market should have vacancy rates of around 7%. Franklin County has the lowest at 1.3%. That's an average. Most of our towns, a lot of our towns, are hovering around 0%. There are simply no homes for people to choose to move into if their situation changes, their household grows, they want to downsize, or for new people to move here to the region. And when you have a limited supply, you have higher costs. Okay, so all of the studies show that we need more housing of all types. Different sizes, different looks, but we also need ones that are available for both market rate and affordable. But what is affordable housing? This is a very complicated issue, but I'll try to boil it down. Housing experts say that to be affordable, you should not spend more than a third of your income on housing-related costs. By keeping at that 30% threshold of your income, you have money left over to spend in the local economy, but also for basic needs like transportation, medical, food, things like that. And there are two forms of affordable housing. There is your official government-sponsored, deed-restricted housing that only people who make certain incomes are eligible to live there. There's also the naturally affordable housing that just happens to exist, and it might be inexpensive for market reasons, such as it's located in a place that may not be so desirable, or it might be older housing. It might have lead paint or mold. This is an important issue, this naturally affordable housing here in Franklin County, because as Jesse mentioned, we have some of the oldest housing stock in the state. So some of our housing is naturally affordable, but not for great reasons. So what is affordable by the numbers here in Franklin County? Housing experts look at what's called the area median income to create thresholds for affordability. And so in Franklin County, for a family of four, the area median income is $104,000. A family of four who is considered low income makes 80% of that area median income. And right now, they are earning around $95,000 a year. A family of four that is considered extremely low income, they make half of that area median income, 50% of that. And they are earning around $60,000 a year here in Franklin County in this year. So if I am a member of a family that earns about that area median income of $104,000, and I don't want to spend more than a third of my income on housing costs, I should be able to afford a home that's around $220,000. That's affordable to me. However, that's not what's available. The median home price here in Franklin County is actually $200,000 more than what I can afford. And that disparity between what I can afford and what's available has only been increasing. It's getting worse. And so if you earn less than that area median income, which by definition half of us do, it's going to be even harder to find a house that's affordable for you. So why have we not been creating housing here in Franklin County? There's a couple of reasons for that. One of which is we do have limited public water and sewer. Developers tend to find that it's generally less expensive and more dependable to build on public water and sewer. So that is a constraint. The next point is an important one here for Franklin County particularly. We have, as Jesse mentioned, the lowest incomes in the state. Here's the visual of what she had mentioned. Our average pay is $53,000 a year. The state average is $91,000. So because of that low income, we have very low rents, and we can't sell homes for very much because we can't afford it. Because of that, but at the same time, we have the same construction costs as we do in Eastern Mass. And so there's very little return on investment for developers to come in and build new homes. They're not going to be able to recoup their project costs because they can't sell or rent for as much as would to cover the cost of building those homes. We also have the oldest housing stock in the country, or I'm sorry, in the state, maybe the country, who knows. Let's go with that. You heard it here. Because of that, we're in a constant state of losing housing to age and deterioration. We're constantly fighting that battle of just replacing our existing housing stock. And this last point is not true just for Franklin County. It is true across the board for the state, for the country. There's often very limited public support for new housing. Often there can be active opposition to it, which if you're a developer and you're just making the numbers work, if you're encountering opposition, it's going to kind of tip that balance. You're not going to want to build. It just makes it harder. So I don't want to leave here with a completely bleak picture, though, and all these lists of challenges and negative things that's happening. We definitely do need more housing, and there are challenges we're going to have to work around. But there has been progress around the region. There has been a number of successful projects, developments that have been occurring, both small, very small, infill scale, rehabbing vacant housing, and also larger projects. And for Franklin County, larger projects usually tend to be about 20 to 30 units. So there's been some great examples of how things can happen. We've also been advocating with regional partners at the state level to have recognition at that state level of our constrained market conditions. There's been also little baby steps that are occurring that we're really excited about. The FERCOG just received grant funding to pilot a shared housing coordinator position to help with our local towns who have no staff to work with them for housing development at that local municipal level. So there's a lot of exciting things that are happening, and I think we're kind of setting the stage to go to that next level to create more housing. And I think because there's a lot of people in this room and a lot of people around this region who are taking it very seriously and thinking strategically about it, we want to make sure we do create this housing that allows to have a sustainable population and a robust workforce, but in a way that maintains also what we love about Franklin County. So I'm very excited to hear what the panelists have to say. They have more real-world experience of on the street, what's going on in the community, and I think it should be a really good conversation. Thank you.
Doesn't Megan do such a good job of putting that all in context, especially that piece around how our aging population doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to fix itself? Every time I try to say that in like one-on-one conversations, I just seem confused. So I usually say, go talk to Megan, or I'm going to have her like write that down for me. Megan did a great job of kind of putting the lens on where we stand in Franklin County, and now we're really excited to invite Secretary Augustus up to the podium to kind of give us the statewide view. He's gonna give us some good news in terms of where Massachusetts is headed. I do want to say that Secretary Augustus did present last week at the Western Mass EDC Developers Conference. He's here with us today. He's also going to be back in Greenfield next week celebrating National Weatherization Day with Community Action Pioneer Valley. So if his commitment to Western Massachusetts could be measured by mileage, it'd be pretty impressive. And we just really want to thank him for his ability and willingness to take time out of his schedule to join the conversation. So without further ado, Secretary Augustus.
Thank you for that nice introduction. I'm sorry I'm a little late and you had to flip things around, but it was great. I got a chance to hear the presentation, which is wonderful, so I appreciate that. You'll hear a lot of those messages reinforced, I think, in my remarks this morning. It is great to be back in Franklin County and here in Greenfield. I'll talk a little bit about the state housing plan that we put out recently, and we just added, I think last week, a digital element to it that really digs deep in the data, that has region-specific data. And I hope that helps support folks who are trying to make change in their communities and want to make sure they have access to facts and to data. Every time I listen to what's going on in Washington, I feel like we're in a fact-free, data-free decision-making world these days. But hopefully at the state and the local level, facts and data still matter. And we want to make sure that we arm you all with that information so you can make good, thoughtful decisions for the future of your communities. And that was informed by 14 listening sessions that we did around the state, including one right in this room. We had a really big turnout, did breakout sessions, and it really helped us make sure that the statewide housing plan reflected the nuances and the uniqueness of different corners of Massachusetts. And what works in Boston sometimes works in Greenfield and sometimes doesn't work in Greenfield. And same thing for the Cape and the Islands or some of our suburban communities. And so hopefully that plan reflects the diversity of needs and challenges across Massachusetts. As many of you know, Massachusetts has a serious housing shortage. You just heard about it as it hits the ground here in Franklin County. That has been decades in the making. We estimate that the state will need to build 220,000 new units over the next decade to fill that gap. But right now, many new developments are squeezed by economic uncertainty. Tariffs have inflated building material costs. High interest rates have constrained private financing. And even active developments can struggle to remain financially viable. I would tell you that more than half of the deals that we had funded in the last 2 or 3 years have come back to us with significant gaps, $3–5 million gaps that need to be funded in order to actually get those projects that were already approved actually into construction. All of these factors have led to a sharp decrease in housing production and have allowed an intensely competitive housing market to emerge where demand far outstrips supply in every region of the state. On the ground, that means our neighbors are struggling to afford the increasingly limited selection of homes and apartments on the market. Even more distressing is that young people are choosing to leave the state because of the high cost and unavailability of housing. More than half of the residents who left Massachusetts in recent years have been those between the ages of 25 and 45. The housing shortage presents a serious threat to the state's economic competitiveness. These are not simply anecdotes. These are trends that are borne out by the data. Last week, as I mentioned, HLC released an updated digital housing plan, which includes new data and strategies to address the housing needs of every region in the state. The plan tells us that statewide, only a tiny fraction of homes, approximately 1.6%, I think that was reflected on one of the slides, are available for sale or rent at any given time. But it also tells us that Franklin County, the vacancy rate is even smaller. Between 2018 and 2022, a mere 0.7, which is even smaller than was on the chart, of homes were available for sale and rent. Furthermore, the housing plan shows us that relative to the rest of the state, the overall population of Franklin County is declining, and older adults represent a growing share of the population. That means there are more older adults on fixed incomes living in large, aging homes with high maintenance costs and few opportunities to downsize. Over the 10-year period, the share of affordable sales in Franklin County has dropped by 28% for four-person households. As we plan for more housing statewide, we want to be intentional about what types of housing we need and for whom. This summer, the Lieutenant Governor and I had the opportunity to tour the county and assess what housing strategies are working here and what more we can do to help meet the housing needs of rural communities. Together with FERCOG and the Franklin County Regional Housing and Redevelopment Authority and members of your legislative delegation, we visited Greenfield and Sunderland, Deerfield, Leverett, and Montague on a housing tour of the region. In Sunderland, we saw success up close as we visited Sanderson Place, which provides aging adults with the opportunity to downsize, offering 33 affordable homes for residents 62 and over. HLC was proud to support that development with low-income housing tax credits. In Montague, we learned about the efforts to streamline local zoning and incentivize more dense housing. In Deerfield, we saw how the state and local partnerships with organizations like Mass Housing Partnership are essential in leveraging surplus property for future development. And in Leverett, a community of less than 2,000 is working hard to find ways to leverage their affordable housing trust and CPA dollars to plan for the future. Still, market conditions in Franklin County are not the same as they are in urban and suburban areas. On our tour, we passed by a number of older homes in need of upgrades and repairs. The Digital State Housing Plan identifies that a third of the homes built in this area were built before 1940, and more than half of those homes were built before the 1970s. These older homes often require updates to meet the needs in terms of accessibility, resiliency, efficiency, and safety. This makes it more difficult for moderate income households to buy or maintain a home. Preservation and rehab of existing homes in Franklin County is a key strategy to ensuring an affordable housing market. And last year, HLC was proud to award Buckland, Coltrane, Ashfield over $1 million in community development block grant dollars to rehabilitate 16 housing units. In total, since the start of this administration, HLC has awarded Franklin County communities over $3 million in CDBG funds to rehabilitate older homes and fund community services. In Greenfield, the Franklin County Regional Housing and Redevelopment Authority and Rural Development, Inc. took on a blighted home, gutted it, and with the help of HLC's Neighborhood Stabilization Fund, sold it through a lottery to a low-income first-time home buyer who moved in last December. That didn't just bring a dilapidated property back to life, it strengthened that neighborhood and put a family in a home they could afford. RDI is now eyeing additional opportunities in Cherners Falls, including replacing a condemned ranch-style house with energy efficiency, 2-bedroom modular home, and pursuing rehabilitation of a second single-family house. This is the kind of neighborhood-by-neighborhood progress we should be replicating across Franklin County. But ending the state's housing shortage and meeting the needs of rural communities takes a big effort. That's why the Healy-Driscoll administration is using every tool in our toolbox to build more and try to bring down costs. The Affordable Homes Act is the cornerstone of the Healy-Driscoll administration's housing agenda, and it includes over $5 billion of authorized funding and more than 50 new policy initiatives to invest in new development and make it easier to build. We have implemented almost 90% of that law and its provisions, and the capital funds are already in the pipeline working to deliver results and to build new housing where it's needed most. Thanks to the authorizations approved by the law, the Healy-Driscoll administration has increased capital funding for housing by 78%. And by the end of next fiscal year, that number will go up to 91%. So by far, the priority of new capital dollars for our administration has been to support the preservation and production of housing across Massachusetts. Right here in Greenfield, this increased capital funding has been used to support the redevelopment of the former Wilson's department store on Main Street into 61 new affordable rental homes. And at 60 Wells Street in Greenfield, HLC was proud to provide low-income tax credits to create 36 studio apartments for chronically homeless and extremely low-income individuals. Still, new housing does not have to mean big development. The opportunity may be right in our own backyards, basements, or attics. Thanks to the Affordable Homes Act, residents across the Commonwealth can now build accessory dwelling units by right on their single-family lots. ADUs provide an opportunity for older adults to downsize, and they also can create new rental opportunities at no cost to taxpayers or local communities. Homeowners make these choices. I would just say, as a quick aside, we will be rolling out with our partners at Mass Housing Partnership some new tools and some financial assistance to help low-income homeowners build out these ADUs. We know you need to access capital to do the rehabs to create these units. We put in our capital plan this year some dollars to help create some new programs. We're also working with the banking community to identify new products that may reduce some of the loan costs, to take out equity, to build out some of these units, to get them online as a way to gently add units across the Commonwealth. We recognize that in rural communities, one major barrier to development can be the lack of infrastructure, and we heard that also in the previous presentation. And specifically for accessory dwelling units, one barrier is upgrading septic systems under Title V. But we also know that we can meet our environmental and housing goals together, and we will continue to look at how we can make it simpler for residents to build ADUs on their property. We also have created the Housing Works incentive program to provide grants to communities to build infrastructure to support housing development. That did not exist prior to our administration. There is now a grant program available to municipalities that will support the infrastructure needs necessary to create housing. Housing Works is one of many grant programs offered under the state's Community One Stop for Growth, a collection of capital grants for communities and local funded projects. These grants are essential for local communities to put pipes in the ground, pave sidewalks, bring down the cost of infrastructure improvements that are necessary for new housing. In January, with Senator Comerford and others, I had the opportunity to visit Irving to discuss the Care Drive Senior Housing Project, another great example of senior housing led by Rural Development, Inc. But this is a project that needs infrastructure improvements to succeed. Care Drive Senior Housing is a project that the Housing Works program was designed to support. And I know we'll be making grant announcements very shortly, and I think folks will be pleased when those are announced. Through the Community One Stop for Growth, the Healy Driscoll administration has also awarded $300,000 in community planning grants to Franklin County, and we will be announcing more awards, as I mentioned, later this month. This administration is focused on Franklin County. Our visits to the region, our conversations with FERCOG and the Regional Housing Redevelopment Authority and the legislative delegation and with all of you have been valuable. This dialogue helps us to make better housing policies that make sense for this region and its unique needs. Based on direct feedback from local elected officials and regional leaders, we recently changed how we distribute low-income housing tax credits and related state resources to better support projects in rural and small market communities. Specifically, we added new scoring category that awards extra points to projects in rural areas, with additional changes to come. This helps level the playing field for developments that might otherwise struggle to compete with higher value urban proposals. And with the feedback from regional stakeholders, we're modifying our housing choice program, which empowers communities to plan and build the housing stock they need to thrive, to better address the unique characteristics of rural communities, many of them here in Franklin County. Stay tuned for more details as we finalize this new initiative. We have our challenges ahead. You've heard them today. But this administration is intentionally engaging with communities and meeting them where they are. The housing shortage is complex, and it will take all of us coming together and pulling out all the stops to plan and build for the future. Thank you all for being part of the solution.
So if you're paying attention, you'll notice that our data points were consistent across all three presentations, which I hope reassures you that we're not making it up. We do need housing. And to further reassure you, we're going to rely on our expert panel here. As kind of a heads up, I've asked everyone to keep their answers to 2 minutes. We're going to see how many questions we can get through. We have planned to distribute prepared responses to all of the questions that I had hoped to have time to ask, and we can distribute that after the breakfast. So fear not, if we don't get through all of the questions, we will send out a follow-up. All right. Really quick, I'm just going to quickly introduce the panel. Linda Dunleavy is the Executive Director of the Franklin Regional Council of Governments. You heard a lot from Secretary Augustus of their close partnership with FERCOG. She has spent decades, more than 30 years, helping our towns work together on regional challenges from housing to transportation to broadband. We can clap for Linda. That's 30 years is pretty impressive. Gina Govani, who leads the Franklin County Regional Housing and Redevelopment Authority, is focused on creating and preserving affordable homes for residents across all 26 towns in Franklin County and the North Quabbin. They, too, are close partners of the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. Dr. Carrie Spitzer from the UMass Donahue Institute brings research lens, leading studies on housing supply. You've heard her latest report referenced a few times, Building Homes, Building Futures. It was released 2 weeks ago. She's going to answer some questions about that report today. From the financial side, Victor Rodriguez of Greenfield Cooperative Bank has over 20 years of experience guiding local borrowers through home ownership process and helping families put down roots in Franklin County. She says it's only been 15 years, but I swear she has been selling houses since grade school. Amanda Abramson Clark is with Cold World Banker Community Realtors, and she works every day with buyers and sellers, offering ground level view of regional housing market. And then rounding out our panel is Tom Fitch, who is the retired CEO of Beat Fog Nozzle and a current trustee at Greenfield Community College. Tom brings the perspective of a lifelong Franklin County resident, a longtime business leader, and an advocate for workforce development. He's also the dad of a dog named Muffin, which might be my second favorite dog name ever, next to Potato. All right, so let's get into it. Linda, this question's for you.
Okay.
Without intervention, Franklin County is projected to lose 10% of our population over the next 20 years, and as we've heard, that results in an estimated 19.5% decrease in total employment by 2050. What's at risk for our towns if we don't make housing accessible to our workforce?
Is this on? Are these
Yep,
on?
you just have to lean forward.
Let me lean forward. I'm Linda Dunleavy, Franklin Regional Council of Governments, and what you've just heard of my bio is my job is to be a nudge at the state and federal level. So, my data is a little worse than what Jesse is saying, is that we could lose up to 25% of our population by 2050, and we will have the highest median age of any county in Massachusetts. That's very bad for Franklin County's economy, very bad for the Massachusetts economy. As I've said to several secretaries, we do not want to be a drain on the rest of the Massachusetts economy. And so what we need to do is to build housing, create jobs, and improve our transportation network all at the same time, which is a bit of a challenge, and yet these population projections do not need to come true. We can prevent them from coming true by working together in this room, by working with the secretary to make sure that we are addressing the needs of Franklin County. And if we don't, Jesse told you and Megan told you of some of the consequences. We won't have employees for our employers. We won't have enough residential property tax to take care of our children in our schools. We won't have enough people to take care of us because we're all getting old. But what we haven't talked about is that billions of dollars in state and federal funding are based on a formula that looks at population. So a loss of population also means we potentially lose funding for our towns, for our infrastructure, for our region, for our communities. It also could mean that we lose representation at the Boston State House or that we lose another congressional seat. And all of that is very bad. And so we must work together to make sure that we are building housing, creating jobs, and improving our transportation infrastructure. Felt like that was more than 2 minutes.
That
Oh, you're so good. You're so good. Thanks.
It's a large ask to ask these folks to answer these questions inside 2 minutes. I fully appreciate that.
Sorry, I don't think that was 2 minutes.
No,
Sorry.
that was great. Tom, this next question is for you. Some community members question the link between housing and economic development, or push for economic development first and then housing second. Not anyone in this room, of course, but I've heard it around. From your perspective, what's at stake for Franklin County's economy and workforce if housing needs remain unmet?
First off, thank you for having me here. That was my test to see if I was leaning in enough. Second, I'd like to have Linda answer the question because she does such a wonderful job. And as we know, or have been hearing, Franklin County is projected to see a decline in population and a decline in jobs. And we haven't been growing, and forecasts aren't favorable. So that's a signal that we've failed to create the conditions for growth, and a lack of diversified, accessible housing is one of those key conditions. Massachusetts is an expensive state in which to do business. The May 25 Pioneer Institute study found that we were one of 4 states that have lost private sector employment since 2020. High taxes and expensive housing are usually cited as key reasons for the high cost of doing business here in Massachusetts. And a strategic approach to adding housing, not any house anywhere, but a strategic approach can lower municipal taxes and housing costs by increasing the supply. That's going to mean more taxpayers spreading the dollars across more people because it's largely a fixed cost system. We can't just build a way out of a housing crisis. It has to be strategic. Technical solutions need strategic direction. Otherwise, we're just putting up walls and we're looking to build a future. So we need to have a clear shared vision as to how housing fits into the region's future. But there really is hope. As we've heard, there's a number of people that want to come here. It's not that we're seeing a mass exodus, it's just that we don't have the right opportunities for people to come and stay. So to generate the sustainable growth, we need the strategic action which aligns the housing with the economic vision, and then work together to build a future where Franklin County thrives.
Great. Victor, you're up next. The Building Homes, Building Futures report that Carrie worked so hard on shows that even middle-income households are struggling to afford housing in Massachusetts. We've heard those statistics here a number of times. From your work with families here in Franklin County, how do you see that play out when you sit down and help people apply for a mortgage? And what is the biggest misconception that people walk into your office with when they go to apply for housing?
I think it's a combination of affordability as well as respectfully reality. When they sit in my office many times, there's nothing like getting a phone call on Friday at 4:45 p.m. for an open house on Saturday, and I mean that facetiously. And I say that because many times there's just a lack of preparation. Not necessarily challenge credit, not necessarily, but proper credit management is something that I see a lot. And what I mean by that is, great credit scores, but maybe they co-signed an automobile loan or lease for a loved one. Maybe they have some student loans out there, things of that nature, that they did not take into account. Many times what I'm hearing is, that's not my car, that's not my lease. My son is paying for it, my daughter's paying for it, so on and so forth. So I think it's truly important that financial literacy, especially with the home buying process, is crucial. And I always tip my hat off to these first-time home buyers that maybe they're not ready right now. Maybe their plan is to be ready for, a year from now. Well, you know what? That gives us plenty of time to lay a platform, build on a foundation of preparation. What could we do? This is what you have to do. This is the direction that you should go in to make that American dream of home ownership a reality. Now, based off of the stats, and I'm on 1 minute and 32 seconds here, but based on the slides and the information that was presented, affordability is a really, really big piece, right? Sometimes you have individuals that are renting from a loved one, and guess what? Maybe they're paying $800 a month for rent. wake up to reality that it's not going to be your mortgage payment. Wish it would be, but it's not going to be your mortgage payment. So I think there's that shock and all with that. And then you factor in, median income, you factor in, their salaries. It's really tough. So I think, the number one thing that I feel strongly about is education. Educate yourself as much as you possibly can. Speak with your lenders. Speak with the business professionals out there, the realtors, the agents that could, get you on that right path.
Amazing. Can we thank Victor for his work? It was said recently that if you want someone who's really invested in keeping Franklin County families here and seeing them successful, it's our mortgage lenders. So thank you to everybody here who's in local banking. Thanks for the work you're doing. We appreciate it. Gina. I'm going to skip around.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. If you could snap your fingers and clear up one misconception around affordable housing, something you never have to explain again, what would it be?
This is a very simple answer, and it's so from the heart. Low-income housing houses working people. We do also house folks who are coming out of homelessness and who are very low income. And we house families who are at 60% of median income. As the Secretary mentioned, the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program is our major subsidy source for low-income housing. For a family of 4 in Franklin County, that's $71,000. You can earn up to $71,000 and qualify for low-income housing. So I just want folks to remember that these are working people, these are people in our communities, and they may not live here yet. They may not live in your town or city yet, but once they get a home there, they are your residents, they are your new neighbors. And I think, as we talk about population decline, we need to welcome more people to our communities and really look at these people for who they are. They're working people supporting our community.
Amanda, you might have heard today that there is a housing shortage. In your experience, how do you see that shortage affecting families and young professionals who want to move within the county or relocate here? And what types of housing are most in demand but hardest to find?
I was just speaking with somebody earlier today saying I think for probably the last 6 years I've been running 30 buyers deep at least that I've been trying to help find a home, and there's a lot of realtors in this room that would agree with what I just said. There's a huge shortage, and especially with younger first-time home buyers and working professionals trying to find a home when the median home price has skyrocketed since COVID and made it unaffordable for a lot of them. When you're talking median sale price at almost $400,000 in Franklin County, and you've already heard the statistics from everybody else, what people are actually making here, it makes it unaffordable, and that's so hard. And really, we need houses that are energy efficient, that can house young families. They don't need to be huge, but a lot of the inventory is huge and needs a lot of work. And so it's a multifaceted problem that we're finding here. And it's also one of the things, and I think any of the bankers in the room can appreciate this also, when we had those crazy low interest rates and it drove the market nuts, you could lock in at a 2.5. Those people aren't going to sell their house now. And that's a problem. And those are the houses that we need to move these young professionals in and move these young families in. And it's actually really great to hear that there are communities being built in Sunderland for some of this aging population where they're finding it affordable and incentivizes them to get out of these homes that are too big for them or too much work, because that's the inventory we need right now to be able to sell.
Great. Secretary Augustus, housing, you mentioned this in your report, but housing conversations often highlight the challenges in the greater Boston area. The state has set a goal of 222,000 new units by 2035. How does Franklin County fit into the state's broader strategy? And how does the state see rural housing development as part of the solution to relieving urban overcrowding and improving affordability costs across the Commonwealth?
I think it's important to remember this housing crisis is affecting everyone, and so everyone, including every community, has to do its share to get us out of this housing crisis. I realize the MBTA Communities Act is not affecting this part of the state, but one of the reasons that we've done such hand-to-hand combat with some communities, including taking them to court to create zoning, to create opportunities for housing, is because those are the barriers in many places. And you have to, I know we'll have another question about the misperceptions about housing and why it's so hard to build housing. We need to overcome that, and the housing crisis affects everybody. Even if you're in your own home, comfortable, maybe you own it outright, or you can meet your mortgage payments comfortably, or you're able to meet your rents, the housing crisis impacts you because the business down the street can't find people to fill the jobs that can afford to live near where they need to work. Your municipal government may not be able to find people who can work for the salaries and live close to those places, and that impacts you, the hospitals, the nursing homes, all of the systems that we count on in our areas. So we need every community to do its share. And here in Franklin County, part of it is preserving what we've got. It's certainly, we can't just have a build strategy and not a preserve strategy because we're just going to be treading water if we do that. That's why on the state level, particularly with our 43,000 state-owned housing units, we're putting $2 billion into improving, modernizing, decarbonizing, making more accessible our state-owned public housing across the Commonwealth. That's so important. All of the families who live there only pay a third of their income. Those are some of the lowest income folks in our communities. Where would they live? Those 70,000 people who are in those units, how would they fare if they were out with everybody else in the housing market with those modest incomes? So job one is to save what we have, preserve what we have, make it better, make it healthier, more sustainable, as we continue to try to find ways to build more housing using some of the expanded tools we have. The federal environment's tough. Interest rates are still higher than they've historically been. Tariffs and other policy uncertainties have made it more expensive to build units, the actual materials in the units. And so, while that's happening, we're doing everything we can at the state, and we all need to do everything we can at the local level to remove the friction points. Hopefully you recently saw we just announced a 30-day MEPA review for about 70% of the housing projects in the state. So basically saying housing is such a priority, we're not going to shortchange the environment, but we can prioritize and make what's often a 9 to 12 month review process and take it down to 30 days. That's time and that's money. And so we're going to do everything we can at the state level as we hope for some improvements at the national level. And interest rates look like they might be coming down. So every time those interest rates come down, that'll be a little wind at our back as we try to make progress here.
Great, thank you. Carrie, the Building Homes and Building Futures report outlines the scale of housing shortage across Western Massachusetts, but based on your findings, what stood out to you about Franklin County specifically?
Sure. And it's tricky going last because I think a lot of what I had planned to say has already been said, but I'll say it again. I think one of the things that was most striking were the really low vacancy rates. And I think I want to put kind of a positive spin on that as much as possible, which I think just signals how much people want to live in this region, right? So it means we have low vacancy rates because there's a lot of demand for housing in this area. Franklin County is a great place to live. The problem is that it's not giving people choice. There's folks who want to move here don't have options due to those low vacancy rates and the fact that over decades we just haven't been producing enough housing. So, I work on housing issues around the state, and I think folks often think that they're unique and have unique challenges, and they do, but it's true also that we're all in this, problem together. Housing in Massachusetts, there's not a single county you could go to, and those numbers look good. Everywhere is really struggling. I think one of the things that's unique here too is, some of these water and sewer infrastructure challenges, and those are going to need unique responses. It's a really rural community, and I think people are just surprised to see that those low vacancy rates are here, as well as in places like Boston.
Thank you. So as you can see, the takeaway is pretty consistent across industries. And again, we are going to prepare the responses in a one-pager that you can reference after. But I want to just acknowledge the expertise that's in the room and thank our panelists for a very quick but very impactful conversation around housing. Can we give them one more round of applause? Do we feel like we have a better handle on housing right now? Do we feel like you've learned something today? Okay, great. I know we have given you a lot to digest, and I'm not just talking about Geraldine's famous French toast casserole. There's a lot of information here. There's a lot of nuances and complexities, as we've all kind of touched on in the various presentations. But what I do want everyone, if you leave here with nothing else, please remember that housing is an economic development strategy. Every new home creates jobs, supports local businesses, and strengthens town revenue. Every home we don't build is a worker we can't keep, a classroom we can't fill, or a shift we can't cover. There are lots of opportunities here. I often spend these breakfasts talking about how much I love Franklin County and how much the people that we work with love Franklin County. As Senator Comerford says, we are open for business. People want to live here. Let's find ways to welcome them in. Let's find ways to keep our kids close. Let's find ways to expand our workforce. Housing is at the center of that. So where do we go from here? This is our ask of you. Take what you have learned today, apply it, use it to influence your advocacy, use it to impact your work. Have conversations, particularly the tough conversations with the people in your community that may not have this information and they may have a different opinion than you do. Stay engaged. What unites us is that we all care about Franklin County, and that's our common ground. That's the foundation that we can build on. So let's work together to continue to build a very prosperous and exciting future for Franklin County. Yes? Great. Good. Love it.